Hi sellers, welcome to another episode of SellerSpeak. I'm Sagarika, Business Development Manager at SellerApp. SellerSpeak is curated to document the journey of successful Amazon sellers and help our budding and growing entrepreneurs to make the most of their Amazon journey. Today we'll be talking about systemizing your business to build for scale or for sale, and joining us would be Yoni Kozminski from Escala. Hi Yoni.
Hey Sagarika, thanks for having me.
I'm really glad that you could join us. And in case any of you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment box below. And let's get started. So, hi Yoni, how are you? I hope your year is off to a great start.
Yeah, it's going great. I mean, we're just at the back end of January and things have definitely kicked off with a bang.
Oh, tell me how.
How? I feel like the whole world went to sleep, around December, just given the nature of the e-commerce life cycle and how Q4 is always the big year and everyone's pushing. And, those first few weeks tend to sort of start off a little slow. And then come sort of mid-January, it's just all in full swing. And it's like you never left. I don't know how it's been. How has it been for you? Pretty
bad. I think we got a very small break there when it was the Christmas holiday. And new year, new SellerApp, we're back to working full force, and there are a lot of exciting things planned. I'll keep you in the loop about those.
Can't wait to hear.
So, Yoni, I would love to know about your Amazon journey and how did you scale to 2 to 5 million in a year? That's a big number. Tell me all about it.
For sure. So I'd love to walk you through that. And the objective of this entire conversation is really how do we give these resources and tools and insights to anyone who's looking to do it themselves? But I think it'd be a false pretense for me to just say, sure, I stepped into Amazon for the first time and I took a business from 2 to 5 million without sharing that my historic background was in creative advertising and digital marketing strategy. So my career for about a decade was working with high-level companies like MasterCard and Sony and Mercedes-Benz, building out their content strategy, their media buying strategies, their production cadences, working with a lot of big D2C brands and building out their e-commerce stores. So that was really my background. And when I stepped into Amazon and I joined a business that was doing 2 million, what I realized, and I think that this rings true to a lot of sellers, is that they effectively launched into Amazon and they found great products and they started building good brands. But what ultimately happened is that things can grow pretty quickly out of control. And I think when I stepped into that business with this team, that's what they'd experienced. They had grown to a level where they no longer had the capabilities or skill sets to really take it to a professionalized direction. And so what I did was I stepped in there and I initially understood what was their current state. So they had, the founders still doing design work and designing things on Canva, and they were writing their own copy, and English was like their third language, and they weren't necessarily great marketers, and they had no experience in supply chain and logistics. They did great work. I mean, it's no small feat to get to $2 million on Amazon, even when it was really the FBA gold rush and things were, I would say, much easier. But there's a difference when it goes from 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. There needs to be a shift. And so how I actually approached it is I took a stock take and I understood what were our gaps, our skill gaps when it came to competency and capability and resources, and what were the things that really moved the needle when it comes to business performance. And so effectively what I did was I assessed and took a real high level picture and then broke it down into granularities as to what was actually happening. Where were our dependencies? Where were the bottlenecks? Where were the challenges? And where was the limitations around resources? So that might be in your Amazon business, you don't have someone who's dedicated to listing optimization or creation. You don't have a graphic designer. You don't have someone who is really focused on your PPC strategy, whether that's internal, leveraging a platform, using an agency, and that can be relevant to every aspect of your business. So that's really how I approached it. And I built a really comprehensive plan and effectively created simply put, an agency that ran this business rather than the business running itself and, fast, but in no centralized direction.
I do feel that a lot of Amazon sellers, even the power sellers, they need to sometimes look back and reflect on where they can have other tools coming in and automating a lot of their work so they can really focus on their strategies. And that's again something that SellerApp in itself also used to think about, that, okay, we have some tools for listing optimization, keyword research, but at the end of the day, the best way out is to eliminate all of these repetitive workflows. And I'm so happy that we put automation as a tool on our dashboard to help people out, especially when they have guidance from people like you. And then you get the tools, you can literally scale at the speed that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a solution like SellerApp enables having the right person to drive the technology, enabling those automations, because at the end of the day, no one's going to remain motivated doing arbitrary tasks that are repeatable, that can be moved over to being simple technology. You want people to be thinking when they need to be thinking, when it's actually going to propel the business in the right direction, not just because they can.
I agree. So when you talk about systems and putting in processes in place, I would love to hear from you, for all our viewers out there, what do you think the word system would mean for an Amazon business? There are just so many definitions out there.
For sure. So for us inside of Escala, which is our process improvement consulting practice that specializes in building systems for e-commerce sellers, we define a system as the perfect harmony between three things: between people, process, and technology. So I'll give you this example. We were just talking about SellerApp and the incredible automations that it can do. Now, those automations are fantastic, but they're only fantastic when you have the right person who understands that. Let's give a really high level example. An individual keyword researcher, that's their dedicated role. They look inside of the SellerApp dashboard every Monday to ensure that things are on track, to make calculated decisions on how to manage the bid strategy or how to edit the main image. Whatever the output is dictated by the person understanding when they need to deliver on that, and that's the process. And then the technology that feeds into that beautiful ecosystem that is, as we define it, a system. So you can have, you can leverage SellerApp, but unless you understand exactly who's doing what and when, then you're not getting the full power of the piece of technology. And so, you're effectively wasting money in investing in anything unless you really build that entire system. So that's, I'd say as simply as I could put it.
I completely agree. You always have to have the right direction and the brains before you invest your money into any kind of a tool. So I also want to know that, since we know what a system is, and I completely agree, it is very important for anybody to have one in place. Let's kind of deep dive into what systemizing your Amazon business would look like.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a big question, right? There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of ways in which people can take that. And again, I'm just going to talk from my personal experience and from what we do inside of Escala. So it's not, people can take different approaches. There's not one size fits all. And that's what we preach a lot in Escala, is that, downloading generic SOPs are never really going to be the panacea to solve all of your life's problems. The reality is we all operate differently. We all have different skill sets. And so when we talk about systemizing a business, I think some of the key things to first look at when I'm thinking about systemizing a business is that you want to build a system that works for you and not one that you work for. And so the first thing, as I mentioned, is like the downloadable templates. I think there's value in the template itself, but it needs to be customized to your business. You can't just simply go ahead and go to some, SOP library and think that that's going to be your be all end all. You can take insights, but it's not necessarily going to help you there. Taking what we would call the bottom up approach is also something to avoid. So the typical person, and I'm starting here because I think it's important because people will have experienced this and they'll start to understand where the differences are. So the bottom up approach, as we define it, is let's say, and let's continue to use the SellerApp example here. So let's say someone is using SellerApp for the very first time, and their whole responsibility lives inside of every functionality that the SellerApp app effectively delivers upon. So what they'll do typically from a bottom-up approach is they'll jump in and they'll say, right, this is how we create custom rules. This is how we monitor whatever the next keyword research. This is how we effectively manage PPC spend. They'll go and they'll define specifically what that function is, but what that fails to address is where does this fit within inside of the entire business ecosystem? So
right.
I typically the thing you find is that I'll build, let's say, Sagarika, you build an SOP and you'll be the person who knows how to find it. And the person who doesn't know how to do the function that you play inside of SellerApp will be searching for the thing that you've built that is for them. So we like to push what we call the top-down approach. And the top-down approach follows, and again, taking on our methodology, we have effectively 5 tiers inside of our process hierarchy. And the very first one is understanding what your process groups and your core processes are. So you first want to look at your business and understand what are the key functions that I have in it. So again, for a simple or for a classic FBA business, you'd be looking at things like inventory management, brand management, customer support, maybe finance and logistics. That might be your 5 core, your core process groups. Now, the next thing that we do, taking that top-down approach, or that you're going to want to do, is you're going to want to understand, well, now that I have the core processes and those process groupings, well, what happens inside of each one of them? So if we take product discovery, for example, inside of product discovery, there'll be an individual contributor at that point. So you'd say the sourcing specialist will have to perform these specific tasks. So now what we're doing when we're talking about systemizing the business is we're taking the top-down approach where we understand how does everything actually interact with one another? How is and the example I think that really hits home is listing creation. Listing creation is one aspect of an Amazon seller's journey where it encompasses so many moving parts. You need to understand, when is the inventory arriving? Have I got my product photography done? Is my keyword research done? Have I handled my PPC spend? EBC, A++ content. I mean, the list goes on. I could sit here and probably we could have another 30 minutes just talking about all the things.
There is an entire ecosystem. Honestly, I never knew about that before I joined this Amazon business, that when you see a storefront, you see a product, you see a listing, and the number of things that are going behind the scenes to just get that listing to rank, it's enormous. It's always left me in awe of the whole idea of one person trying to handle so many things.
Exactly. And that's exactly why you build systems and processes so that, I often joke, and it's not really that funny, but no e-commerce seller entrepreneur started an Amazon FBA business in order to work 100 hours a week. That's not why you created it. The idea of entrepreneurship and the freedom attached to it is, it's really, it's really not as accurate as you would think unless you get control of building these systems and building the right mechanisms to, protect your time. And so back to building an effective system. When you understand at a high level what's happening in the business and you start to build, the next subset and the next subset, you sort of fill in the gaps, right? It's way too hard to take it from the bottom up approach and you'll lose touch of how everything works. Also, just making sure that everything is uniform. Like I was saying before, I mean, if I could share my screen and I could show people, I could show visual, tangible examples of what we're talking about here. But I think for context here, in our 5 layers of our hierarchy, the next one down is activities. So what are the activities that are actually performed? And then the last stage is the full-blown SOPs. So this is the individual contributor, what they're doing, who's delivering it, what are the stages, the video informationals, the text, the screenshots, everything that goes into performing it. So, in our methodology, firm belief is that you should be able to, within 15 seconds, figure out exactly what it is you need to do. If you're new to the business, or if you're an existing team member, you should be able to easily and quickly access the information you need to either validate or learn for the first time how you do what you do in any aspect. So again, at a high level, for an audio recording, that is effectively how we approach building systems.
It makes a lot of sense. If you don't have an idea of what needs to be done, no matter which direction you put a step into, you're going to lose. So having these systems and understanding what the word system for Amazon really means is really essential. And thank you so much for explaining that so well. Also tell me that since somebody already knows what it would mean to have a system and how to systemize, what are some concrete steps that they can take right away to get this in place?
Yeah, concrete steps. So building uniformity. So again, I can't share my screen right now, but when I talk about building uniformity, I mean that, when we design things out, when we look at our core processes and our process groups, we have a numbering cadence. So the first core process is 1.0, the second core process 2.0, the third 3.0. And then when we look at our process groups, we'll then step into 1.1, new product discovery, product research and development, 1.2. So numerating it and making sure that things follow a really easy flow so that at every stage, so when you're looking at everything from our core processes to our process groups to the sub-processes to the activities and finally the working instructions, you'll see that numbering cadence the whole way through. And it's very easy for you to connect the dots as to what effectively needs to be done. So I'd say that's a pretty concrete way to start to approach it. I'd say like some of the things that you should be doing is that depending on at what level you're at, simplicity is greater than complexity. So don't try don't try and take it to the moon without ever having a process in place. Just get the things right. Don't try and build, like when we look at what we do in escala, every client says to us, well, can't you just forget about the current state? Let's just build the future state, build what our operations should look like. And that is a surefire way to make every mistake in the book. And it's the same for you at home, building your own processes, is that you need to take a stock take as to what's happening right now today, and then build upon that, not try and build and bring in, 10 new technologies and, moving from Slack to, you want to use a million other platforms. You go from, from all the different technologies, just get the baselines right and then start to move forward. Don't try and fix everything at once. I'd say that's probably some concrete steps,
We know what a system is, we know why we need to systemize, and we have some concrete plans of action. And since you yourself have scaled something from 2 million to 5 million, you know what you would define as success in every step. So if somebody is systemizing their business, what do you think would be ways to measure their success with it?
Yeah, great question, Sagarika. Really great question. I might answer your question with some examples of some of the challenges that founders face. And I think this is the easiest way for people to understand, like, what does this really unlock when you actually can effectively systemize your business? So I'm just giving you a long-winded answer here, Sagarika. So we like to call one of the things that we see with founders the hero product rule. So that's when, let's say someone has 30 SKUs, right? And inside of those 30 SKUs, there's 3 top performers in the business. And what tends to happen is you gravitate towards the things that are going really well. And you say, you know what, let's keep growing those products. Let's keep growing that brand. Let's keep growing those specifics because we understand how to do it. But the reality is you're sitting on the other 27 SKUs. That's inventory that's not moving. That's dead weight. And so the question we always ask is, what if you could give the same level of attention to all 30 products that you could your top 3 performers? And so I'd say in the first instance, success and how you would measure that is, are you giving the same level of attention? Is the quality of your output effectively the same across your entire business? And, you could even use that for a service provider too. The biggest concern is that you have 50 team members, we've got 240 odd. And so the biggest concern is the service delivery the same as if, the founder were to get on it? And that's what you're always driving toward. It's the same inside of e-commerce, just with a focus on, I want to make sure that I'm giving every single product the same level of love and attention. So that's our first yardstick. If you feel like not all products are built equally, and not all brands are either, but if you can say, hand over your heart, that you've done every single thing that you can to make sure that it's had the same level of attention for keyword research and listing optimization, and you're allocating resources effectively, then I would say that's a really good indicator for you. Another example is that for a lot of founders, we call it the visionary's time. So typically the founder, if they could spend 80% of their time on things that really move the needle, that are things like new product development, that are things like, it's not going to be customer support and PPC management, right? But what you'll find is a lot of founders really spend a ton of time on these things that need to be done, but aren't critical aren't critical for them to be the person to deliver it. So effectively building a system enables you to say, right, I'm now going to focus on things that move the needle, and that's going to yield a much higher ROI when it comes to the business. And lastly is, on the back of that is product acceleration. So most Amazon e-commerce sellers, they start these businesses because they have a passion around a brand, around a product, around something that they saw that they thought would revolutionize the world. And everyone, tends to feel like it's their baby, right? They do everything to nurture it. So the question we like to ask as well is, what's stopping you from creating 5 times as many products as you are today, or launching 5 times the number of products that you launched today? And every single answer will always come back to, they haven't built the right system that removes them from, I wouldn't necessarily say the minutia, but the urgent tasks versus the important tasks. And as a result, they get stuck. And so again, answering that same question, the yardstick or that measure is, am I launching the products that I plan to launch this year? Am I doing the things that really move the needle? Am I focused on all of my products? Are all my children getting the same love and attention? Am I stopping my favoritism? So, that's I'd say those are all really great yardsticks for them to measure upon.
I think I'm going to tell that one to my mother to check in if I'm getting the same attention or not.
She's got to answer that question and say you are.
If I don't get the right answer, I'm giving her a list of a system that please put this in place. Otherwise, this is not going to happen.
That's what you call managing up.
Fair enough. That is why we need people who can guide us with this. And now that I know this, it's going to be a part of my daily life. People around will find it tedious, but
that's probably, I would have to say, that's got to be the best application of anything I've ever shared publicly. So I'm sorry, Mom. Hopefully you are giving Sagarika the love and attention if you're listening to this. She's been fantastic.
Thank you so much. So now that we have, going back to systems, everything in place to understand, to figure out how to do it, and now we know exactly how to measure it. For somebody who themselves is result oriented, I like to have those yardsticks in place just to know that I'm on the right track. What do you think would be important for an Amazon business for scaling or even to get more sales? Can you give me some ideas?
For sure. So, whether you're looking to scale your Amazon business or sell it, systems are critical, and they're critical for all the reasons that we've shared up until this point. But when you look at scaling a business, the idea is that our individual input as individual contributors, that time is not scalable. You really need to focus on the things that are going to have the greatest impact. And so while going through this, you need to continue to, you as founder, senior manager, or anyone inside of the business, you need to continue to focus in on the areas in which you add the most intrinsic value to the business. And you'll often find, I'd say, I don't know if I could say 100% of the time, but a pretty high percentage that the things that you are most passionate about are the things you're going to be best at. And that means that you really are in, I've heard many different phrases used, but in your unique superpower as to what you can deliver. So when it comes to systemizing a business, when you start to define accountabilities and responsibilities and the things that really mean success, and you as someone who's really results orientated, when you can guide someone in like you and say, Sagarika, if you perform X, Y, and Z objectives, it's going to have this impact on the business, and that's how you're going to get a promotion, or that's how you're going to move laterally into recording podcasts or being head of production or whatever, head of marketing, whatever the desired role is. Giving people those insights into how they get there is critical around the system. As you grow your business, the levers that you pull become very different. It's how do I mobilize people to get behind the vision to drive the business forward and for them to be really fulfilled inside of what it is they're doing. How do I enable them? So going back to it, when you systemize a business or franchising it effectively, it means that you don't have any key dependencies or players. Those players are effectively in their superpower and they're delivering. And, it's not to look at it transactionally. It's actually quite the opposite. But, you as the business owner, you don't want to be in a position whereby you've built this great business and all of a sudden you lose your key designer. You only had one designer. All of a sudden you've lost them. You can't find a replacement. Sales are tanking because it was all about the quality of how frequently we were launching new products, for example. So the idea around systemizing it means that even if that designer leaves, you understand the exact process that was delivered and you can find someone to, step in and fill those shoes. So the same can be said for the sale of a business, particularly, and I'm talking about less private equity and strategics who will acquire a business and typically acquire all of the personnel that exist inside of it, and they just want that business to continue running. Talking about e-commerce entrepreneurs who are looking to sell their FBA business. These aggregators and strategics and, and even private equity, less so in this case, but let's use, everyone knows about the aggregator model. They're really looking to acquire the brand. So what they're looking for is, how do I acquire this brand? How do I remove the founder as quickly as humanly possible? And how do I integrate it into my business? That's really what they're looking for, right? So on the back of that, the asset that is their brand becomes intrinsically more valuable when someone can open it up, say, right, I understand who all of your suppliers are. I understand how to operate with them. I understand the terms. I understand who needs to speak to who and when. I understand what's happening from content creation to production, where I'm sourcing my materials from, etc. And when you go to actually exit the business, that can mean, that might mean half a turn or a turn in terms of an additional multiple, which, we're talking about pretty significant impacts to that, that large payday. So whether you're selling a business, whether you're scaling a business, the methodology and the focus and the objective is always, how do I remove myself to build a system that I can have better people delivering the work who are passionate about what they're doing, or how do I hand it over so that someone can at a glance understand every aspect of my operation?
I think that's really important, not just for an aggregator, even when you have people joining, especially if you're working in a startup like me, people change, and it's always a task to train somebody new unless the person who left the job has put everything in the most crystal clear manner possible. And when you're talking about a company that's growing and is already at, say, 2 million like yours, if you didn't have the right resources to guide you with what needs to be done, it would have been way tougher than just stepping into that role. And yeah, I think I'm in complete tandem with the idea that unless you have a system in place, even for something as small as a daily routine, it can get very tedious and you can lose sight of what's really important. So this is something that I believe we would love to talk a lot more about, maybe in another session. But for today, I think that's a lot of information for everyone to absorb. And there are some really concrete steps that Yoni mentioned that you can put into action right away. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks again, Yoni, for being here. Do you have any final messages for people watching?
Thanks for having me. No final messages. I hope everyone finds success and that this was useful. And yeah, I'm always reachable, so feel free to reach out. And if I can help you, I'd love to.
I can vouch for that. Yoni is always reachable. Just drop him a message and he'll get back to you pretty soon. And for any additional questions, you can always drop them down in the comment box. And until next time, happy selling.